My name is Madison Blake, and I was erased long before they ever said it out loud. Not with cruelty, with politeness, with seating charts and silence. The last thing they told me that what I built was a cute little hobby, that I should focus on finding a husband. Then came 3 years of nothing. No calls, no questions, not even when Payflux made the front page. But this December, something changed. A cream-colored envelope arrived, perfect loops, gold trim, and all the arrogance money could print. A Christmas invitation. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what it said. Come back. Smile. Perform. What they didn't know was, I never stopped preparing. Before I show you what happened when the dinner started and the power shifted, tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated. And came back owning the room. It sat there on my desk like it owned the damn room. Heavy cardstock, gold embossed, the kind of thing they would send. I didn't need to flip it over to know the handwriting. Cheryl's perfect loops. Still playing matriarch, I see. 3 years. 3 years since that night. When Uncle Robert laughed at my pitch. When Nathan leaned back in his chair and asked if I knew how taxes worked. And Cheryl just looked at me with that smile that wasn't a smile. A hobby, they called it. Something I could do while I waited for a real job or a real man. And then silence. Nothing. Not a call. Not a text. Not even when the first article came out. Young founder raises $5 million pre-seed. Still nothing when we crossed Series B, and certainly not when Payflux became the backbone for half the mid-tier e-commerce sites in the country. But today, this damn envelope shows up. With snow hitting the windows behind me like time itself tapping on the glass. The city sprawled out beyond. Alive, vast, utterly indifferent. I took a breath and slid it open with the letter opener I never used. A Christmas invitation. Handwritten. Personal. The Cole family's annual Christmas Eve gala. Same house. Same people. Same politics. I stood up and walked toward the window, envelope dangling from my fingers. Alyssa hadn't come in yet, which gave me a few seconds, just a few, to sit in the weight of it all. On the glass shelf by the corner was the old leather notebook. Frayed spine, smudged pages, my first draft of Payflux, the one they had flipped through and chuckled at. I brushed my fingers along the cover just lightly. My hand trembled. Damn it, just a little. But I noticed. That notebook held everything they discarded, and now it was the blueprint for everything they couldn't reach. The door opened with a soft click. You're not going to believe this, Alyssa said, holding her phone like it contained state secrets. Meraki Inc. just secured the final 11%. We're in. Fully. I smiled, not moving. You filed it under the shell? She nodded. 6 layers deep, like you asked. Not even a bloodhound could trace it back to you. I turned, tossing the envelope onto my desk. It landed beside the notebook, one future discarded, the other built in spite of them. They want me at Christmas, I said, not asking. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. To reconcile? To perform. I walked to the chair, sat down, leaned back. But we'll give them a show. She hesitated. Are you actually going? I looked at her, calm. Confirm my attendance. And Alyssa. Schedule the press release. 2:05 p.m. Christmas Day. She blinked. Not before? They'll need a few hours to digest the turkey. She gave a half smile, almost reluctant. Want me to prepare the files? I leaned forward, hand brushing the notebook once more. No rush. I've had 6 years to get ready. The Blake mansion looked the same. Marble, gold trim, and all the coldness money couldn't hide. Even after all these years, the air smelled the same. Imported fur and forced affection. The kind of place where fireplaces crackled more for show than warmth. I pulled up the long driveway in a car that looked like it belonged to a guest, not blood. Alyssa had offered the black Tesla. I refused. Tonight wasn't about show. It was about sting. and nothing stung them like simplicity. The front door opened before I reached the steps. A housekeeper, new, not one I recognized, took my coat, her eyes scanning me like she wasn't sure if I'd wandered in from the wrong entrance. I smiled politely. She didn't return it. Inside, nothing had changed. The chandelier still cast its glittering judgment over the marble foyer. The same oil portraits lined the walls, men with stern mouths and women with perfect necks. And in the dining room, God, the dining room, it was like stepping back into a cold, gilded nightmare. Cheryl stood at the head, wine glass poised like a dagger. "Darling," she purred, walking toward me, arms outstretched like she'd forgotten all those unanswered messages. "You came after all." Nathan was already seated, swirling his glass. Robert Sr. barely glanced up. And Elliot, little Elliot, sat at the far end, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. "You look simple," Cheryl added, glancing down at my black dress. "Elegant, understated." I nodded. "Just trying to match the mood." She laughed. The others didn't. As expected, my place was near the kitchen door. I remembered that chair, slightly lower than the rest. When I was 10, they'd said it was closer to dessert. I knew better now. They always sat the outsider near the servants. Dinner was theater. They talked about vacations, hedge funds, Elliot's GPA. No one asked what I'd been doing. No one dared bring up pay flux. Nathan leaned back, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "So, still running that little finance thing?" I met his gaze. "Still running it." Cheryl sipped her wine, eyes dancing. "Well, it's the season for generosity, isn't it? We're just glad you're doing okay." "To family," Nathan said, lifting his glass. "Even those we kept out of pity." A beat. Then Cheryl added, too smoothly, "It's the season for charity, after all." I said nothing. I just smiled. Elliot shifted beside me. His hand disappeared under the tablecloth, then returned to his lap. I felt something, light, against my thigh. A folded page. The dinner rolled on. Robert Sr. made a joke about government taxes. Nathan laughed too loudly. Cheryl kept refilling her glass with vintage approval. I waited. I listened. I let them play their roles. When I unfolded the paper beneath the table, my breath caught. The pages were worn. Faded ink. My handwriting. The original Payflux proposal. The one Robert had laughed at and thrown out that night. I had thought it was gone forever. Elliot's eyes flicked to mine. No words. Just a nod. The fire snapped in the hearth. Robert was mumbling about old money. Nathan interrupted with something about IPOs. Then, as if the room needed one more insult. "Let's be real," Nathan said, voice loud and steady. "Madison's a charity case. Always was." My fingers tightened around the page. I didn't flinch. I didn't break. I just looked down at the wine in my glass and let the silence expand like a noose. My phone vibrated. Alyssa. 10 minutes. Shall I knock or let them stew first? The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. Not a second late. Not a second wasted. For a moment, no one moved. The silverware hung midair. Cheryl's mouth froze in an awkward half-smile. The fireplace crackled behind me, but even that sounded hesitant. I rose slowly, pushing back the same creaky chair they'd always given me. The one closer to the kitchen, the one that never quite matched the set. "I'll get it," I said simply. The long hallway echoed beneath my steps, the marble too polished, too perfect, just like the people who once walked it as if they owned the world. As I reached the door, I allowed myself one deep breath. Then I opened it. Alyssa stood there, crisp as ever in a steel gray coat, a leather folder in one hand, and a look in her eyes that could have sliced diamonds. She gave a small nod. "Ms. Blake." I turned without another word and walked back toward the dining room. She followed. When we entered, all eyes turned. Robert was mid-toast, frozen mid-sentence. Nathan blinked, wine glass suspended like a bad idea. Cheryl gave Alyssa a once-over, probably assuming she was catering staff. Alyssa didn't flinch. "Apologies for the interruption," she said, placing the folder on the table like a royal decree. "Meraki Inc. has just completed the final transfer." Pause. Eyes darting. Alyssa smiled. "Effective immediately, Madison Blake is the controlling stakeholder of Blake Dynamics." Robert's glass clinked softly against the table. Nathan made a sound, something between a cough and a gasp. Cheryl's fork slipped from her hand, clattering like the final bell. I sat back down, slowly, as if I had all the time in the world. Pulled out my phone. Forbes lit up the screen. Blake Dynamics acquired in silent multi-billion-dollar move. CEO, Madison Blake reshapes financial sector overnight. No one spoke. Alyssa opened the folder. "We brought gifts, holiday spirit and all." She laid out the documents like playing cards. NDAS, dismissal letters, new board configuration. It's all there. Then she looked directly at Cheryl. "This is your golden parachute. Generous, considering what I got from you." Cheryl's mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish out of air. Robert leaned forward, his voice shaking. This is a hostile takeover." "No," I said calmly. "This is a reckoning." Alyssa stepped back. I reached into my bag and pulled out something older than any of the wine bottles they'd uncorked tonight. The notebook. The same one they'd laughed at, dismissed, crumpled into trash. Except now it was worn from use, from building, from becoming something real. I placed it on the table. Between the untouched turkey and a half-drunk glass of Cabernet. They all stared. Robert's face was red now. "That little project. You used it to take back everything you said I didn't deserve." I finished for him. I locked eyes with him. "You called this a cute hobby. That hobby now owns everything you built. Merry Christmas." He didn't respond. Just sat there, breathing heavy, like the words themselves knocked the air from his lungs. Then I turned to Nathan. "Didn't you say I couldn't afford an East Side apartment? I own that entire block now." The room didn't erupt. It caved in, quietly, beautifully, like a cathedral collapsing from within. No one screamed, no one shouted. The weight of what had just happened settled into their bones like December frost, sharp, invasive, irreversible. Alyssa flipped open the folder again and began distributing envelopes with the precision of a surgeon. One in front of Robert, one for Cheryl. Another slid toward Nathan with a soft, deadly whisper. "Termination letter. NDA. Severance," she announced, her voice as calm as a weather report. "You'll find the terms are generous. We factored in your pensions, reputational damage mitigation, and, for Cheryl, a stipend for public relations coaching. You're welcome." Cheryl's chair creaked as she lurched forward. "You can't just fire your own family." I didn't even look at her when I answered. "You stopped being that 3 years ago." Her lips trembled, but no sound followed. Maybe she realized this wasn't theater. It was final. Robert rose next, face flushed and fingers curled like claws. "I'll sue. For control. For legacy. For everything you stole." Alyssa barely blinked. "Already anticipated. You'll lose. Also, your attorney's firm is now under contract with Meraki. Conflict of interest. But please waste the retainer." He froze, eyes scanning the envelope as if it might change its contents just because he wanted it to. Nathan didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the untouched salad plate, his fingers tightening around the stem of his wine glass until it cracked. Hairline fracture, silent and slow. I didn't even have to say his name. Instead, I turned toward the larger screen mounted above the fireplace. Alyssa mirrored my phone screen onto it. I tapped twice. A list of social media links popped up. Screenshots, usernames, exact timestamps. "Before midnight," I said. All posts referring to me as a failure, a parasite, a cautionary tale. Delete them. Instagram, X, LinkedIn. Don't bother with the usual delay excuses. The metadata's already logged. Cheryl's mouth opened again, but this time Alyssa beat her to it. And for legal clarity, refusal to comply with those conditions invalidates your severance. It's all outlined. Section 4B. I didn't need to explain further. Elliot, still silent, reached toward the envelope in front of him. He didn't open it. Just turned it over once, twice, like he was trying to feel the weight of what I'd done, what they'd made me do. Then Robert's phone buzzed. The vibration echoed strangely loud in the room. He checked it. His mouth slackened. And for the first time in my entire life, Robert Blake Sr. looked truly lost. He handed the phone to Cheryl with a mechanical motion. She read it. Her hand went limp. Nathan didn't even ask what it said. He didn't have to. The message was from the Blake Dynamics Board of Directors. It was short. Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove Robert Blake Sr. as CEO. A public statement will follow. There were no arguments, no chairs thrown, no appeals to legacy or pride or fairness. Just silence. I stood, walked to the end of the table, let my hand rest on the notebook, the same one they'd ridiculed. I looked at each of them, one by one. Consider this an exit interview, I said quietly. And trust me, this is the kind version. I didn't need revenge, just receipts. And I kept every single one. The dining room had lost its shine. The fire dimmed. The air thickened. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. The power had shifted, and no one was getting it back. I led the group into the living room where a 60-inch screen waited above the white marble mantel. Alyssa plugged in her tablet, and the display flickered. Blue background, structured fonts, dates, and arrows. Not drama, just data. This won't take long, I said, settling into the leather chair across from the fireplace. I just want to walk you through how we got here, since no one bothered to ask. Alyssa tapped. The first slide appeared. Solaris Holdings, 2018. This was where I went after you threw me out, I said. No apartment, no money. Slept in the back of my Honda Civic for a month. Alyssa found me applying for receptionist work at a co-working space in Midtown. Cheryl's breath caught, but I didn't pause. We launched a bookkeeping startup. Sold it, took every cent, rolled it into Bridgegate Equity. From there, Nolan Group, then Meraki. Each company logo lit up as Alyssa spoke softly, pulling up dates, acquisition papers, even bank wire screenshots. No shell companies, no dirty tricks, just strategy and time. Robert leaned forward, squinting. Next slide, ownership breakdown. Blake Dynamics, Q4 2024, 72.3%. His face lost all color. Turns out, I said, if you ignore someone long enough, they learn how to move in silence. Thank you, by the way, for not noticing your board sold off voting shares 2 years ago. A document appeared. It was a letter, dated June 2018. Robert's signature at the bottom. I asked for $10,000, I said, holding the clicker in one hand. Just 10. To cover beta testing for Payflux. This was your response. No interest in subsidizing fantasies. The words were sharp, black ink slashing across the screen. A laugh tried to rise in my throat, but I swallowed it. It didn't need to be spoken. Nathan stared at the carpet. Cheryl blinked too often. Robert didn't even flinch. Maybe because he couldn't. Elliot stood. He walked around the coffee table, moved slowly to my side, and stood just behind me. No words, just presence, just choice. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached for the notebook. The old leather cover creaked softly as I opened it, turning to the first page. The ink smudge from that night was still there, where my pen had slipped when I tried to rewrite the numbers Robert mocked. I held the page up to the light. Funny how this bad idea just bought your legacy. Silence wrapped around the room like gauze, tight, sterile, and suffocating. Then my phone buzzed in my lap. Alyssa glanced down. It's the Times. I opened the notification. New York Times. Exclusive secured. Front page. You're now the face of silent power. I didn't walk out to applause. I walked out to silence. And that's how I knew I'd won. No chairs scraped. No voices rose. The air behind me was still. Even the fire in the hearth had lost its sound. I walked past the portraits lining the hallway. Robert shaking hands with governors, Cheryl on the charity circuit, Nathan in his graduation cap. None of them featured me. That omission no longer stung. It was simply factual. Elliot met us at the front foyer. He didn't say anything. Just opened the door as snow danced in the cold Connecticut air. His hand stayed on the brass handle an extra second, long enough for me to catch his eyes. Not pity, respect, and perhaps something more dangerous in this family. Alignment. I stepped through without another word. Alyssa followed, her heels muffled on the thick rugs. Behind us, the Blake mansion stood like a museum, expensive, curated, and lifeless. Once in the car, Alyssa didn't speak until we'd passed the old gas station on Route 9, the same one I used to park behind at night. She glanced over. So, she said, best Christmas gift ever? I let the silence settle before answering. No, I said, but it was the most necessary. The drive back to Manhattan was uneventful. Just snowfall, headlights, and the occasional blur of holiday decorations. The world had moved on. But for the Blakes, time had just stopped. By the time we reached the penthouse, the city lights had turned golden. My home stood tall, windows glowing warm, every square inch paid for in sweat and silence. Alyssa stepped into the kitchen, muttering something about chamomile tea. I stayed by the window, watching flakes drift past the skyline, wondering if Robert had read the card yet. He would, if he hadn't already. I knew the delivery arrived on time. White lilies in a black box, hand-delivered to the Blake mansion at 4 p.m. sharp. The card said, Merry Christmas, no more pity, only terms. Your CEO. The phone buzzed. Once, twice. Then a wave. Robert. 13 missed calls. Cheryl. 4. Nathan. Blocked. I let the screen go dark again. Alyssa returned with 2 mugs and that same amused tilt in her smile. If they want a meeting, I said, lifting the tea to my lips, they can book one, like everyone else. I didn't expect the silence to feel so full. For most of my life, silence had meant absence, of love, of support, of acknowledgement. But now it felt like something else entirely. Closure, maybe, or power, or just the weight of knowing that I had rewritten the final chapter they tried to write for me. The snow was still falling when Alyssa and I got back to the penthouse. She offered me tea again. Chamomile, just like always. I didn't drink it right away. I just stood by the window, watching the city breathe, while the mansion up north probably sat in stunned stillness, like a relic frozen in time. 13 missed calls from Robert. 4 from Cheryl. Nathan was still blocked. And still, the only voice I heard was my own. This was never about revenge. Not the petty kind. I didn't want to make them cry. I didn't want apologies. What I wanted, what I needed, was the simple, undeniable clarity of truth. I needed them to feel the vacuum they'd created when they cast me out, and to realize that I'd learned how to build in that void, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, scar by scar. It was never about the company. Not really. Blake dynamics could rise or fall tomorrow, and I wouldn't lose sleep. What mattered was that I now controlled the narrative, mine and theirs. What mattered was that Elliot had seen through the cracks, had chosen to remember. That someone had held on to the notebook when I had almost let it go. Funny, isn't it? For so long, I believed I was alone. Turns out I just hadn't been looking in the right direction. As Alyssa sipped her tea, she asked again, so softly I almost missed it. Would you do it all again? I looked at her. The woman who once believed in my napkin sketches, who'd worked nights with me from a dingy storage unit downtown, who now ran billion-dollar logistics with a laugh and a clipboard. Every second, I said. I turned my phone over and tapped it off. For once, I didn't care what they said next. The fight was over. The power had shifted. The terms were mine now. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to justify my success, or my scars, or my silence. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. They used to ask, "What happened to Madison Blake?" Now, they know. What they once called weakness had become her greatest leverage. She didn't win by shouting louder. She won by never letting them write her ending. When injustice is met with quiet determination, the verdict echoes longer than any applause. Like a tide slowly reclaiming the shore, truth always finds its way back, no matter how long it's been buried. And sometimes, walking away without looking back is the loudest victory of all. They didn't ask how I built it. They just assumed I didn't. They never said we were wrong. They just started calling me Ms. Blake. This wasn't revenge. It was the correction of a narrative. The one they wrote without me. And never thought I'd revise. If you've ever been quietly replaced, politely erased, or told to be realistic, just know. You don't have to shout to shift the room. You just have to outlast the lie. Leave a comment if you've ever rebuilt in silence, and hit subscribe if you know what it means to win. Not with noise, but with ownership. Because some of us weren't born to fit in the picture. We were born to own the frame. Thank you, truly, for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you're still here, reading these words, that means you didn't just let this play in the background. You didn't skip ahead. You chose to be present, to feel, to witness what so many people are too quick to overlook, or too uncomfortable to name. And that matters more than you might realize. This wasn't just the story of Charlotte. It wasn't just about a chair placed too close to the kitchen or a smile that hid 1,000 cuts. It wasn't about family politics or overlooked talent or even the way silence was used as a weapon. It was about all of us. Those who've ever been left off the list, sat at the wrong end of the table, talked over, dismissed, rewritten, or told to be grateful for crumbs we built the table to hold. Maybe you know what it feels like to be spoken to like you're temporary, to be handed a compliment that's really a warning, to feel the sting of a backhanded, "We're just looking out for you," to shrink so that someone else can feel bigger in the room. If that's you, this wasn't just a story. This was a mirror. A quiet, powerful acknowledgement that you've been seen, that your experience is valid, that you are not crazy, you are not too much, you are not alone. Here, we don't tell stories with perfect endings, because life rarely gives us those. What we tell are the stories that linger, stories that stretch across years, sometimes decades, stories where justice doesn't arrive in a speech, but in an email chain. A notarized document. A quiet decision to stop explaining yourself. Because we believe in truth. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that endures. The kind that outlives gossip, outshines silence, outlasts performance. Justice doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs light. And once truth is seen, truly seen, it cannot be unseen. So thank you. Thank you for staying even when the story got heavy. Thank you for not skipping past the discomfort. Thank you for choosing presence over passivity, awareness over distraction, and courage over convenience. You, yes, you, are why we keep doing this. Not for clicks, not for trends, not for applause, but for moments like this, where someone out there feels less alone, more grounded, more clear. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a door slammed too early, or a room you were never invited into, or a version of yourself you had to bury just to survive, then we hope this is not the end of your reflection. We hope it's the beginning of something much more powerful, a reclaiming, a rewriting, a return to what's always been yours. We'll still be here. telling the stories someone once tried to bury, speaking softly but with purpose, not shouting to be heard, but speaking to remind you that your silence doesn't mean surrender. And your voice, when you're ready to use it, will echo longer than any insult ever could. So if you'd like to walk this path with us, hit subscribe, not for the numbers, but so that no one has to carry the truth alone again. Once more, thank you for listening, for holding space, for seeing what others chose to ignore. We'll see you in the next story, where silence isn't the final word, but the quiet before something true finally rises.